My alarm goes off at 3:00 a.m., not because the flight leaves early, because of something else, something most passengers never think about. See, the thing that keeps pilots up at night isn't turbulence. It isn't engine failure. It's something way more human than that. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what it is and why it changes how I fly every single time. Hey, I'm Captain Alex. I've been flying commercial planes for over 25 years now. I've flown everything from small regional jets to wide-body aircraft that carry almost 300 people across oceans. I've seen sunrises from 38,000 feet that most people will never witness in their lifetime. And I've also had days where I questioned if this job was even worth it. Today, I'm taking you through a full day in my life, not the postcard version, not the version where I'm smiling in a crisp uniform at the airport lounge. The real version, the 3 a.m. wake-ups, the stuff going through my head during takeoff, what actually happens when there's turbulence, and why landing, not takeoff, is the hardest part of my entire job. By the end of this video, you're going to look at flying completely differently. So if that sounds good to you, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and drop a like before we get going. It genuinely helps this channel grow, and I promise you, there's no fluff here. Just 25 years of real experience, straight to you. Let's get into it. Most people think a pilot's day starts when they walk into the airport. It doesn't. It starts the night before, sometimes even 2 days before, depending on the schedule. Let's say I've got a flight departing at 6:30 in the morning. That means I need to be at the airport by around 4:45, which means I need to leave my house by 4:00, which means my alarm goes off at 3:00 a.m. so I have time to shower, eat something light, and mentally prepare. Here's something people don't realize: pilots have strict rest requirements. It's not optional. Aviation authorities require a minimum number of hours of rest before a flight, and there's a reason for that. Fatigue is one of the biggest hidden dangers in this job. So the night before a flight, I'm not out having dinner with friends or staying up watching a show. I'm in bed early, sometimes by 8:30 p.m., because I know that alarm is coming. I also lay out my uniform the night before. Sounds simple, but when you're running on 4 hours of sleep, you don't want to be searching for a missing shoe at 3:45 in the morning. I check my flight bag, my logbook, my tablet with charts and manuals, a spare set of pens, my ID badge. Everything has a place. Everything is checked twice. And here's the part that surprised me when I was younger in this career. The mental preparation matters just as much as the physical stuff. Before I even get in a car to drive to the airport, I'm already thinking about the route. What's the weather looking like along the way? Is there anything unusual about this particular aircraft I'll be flying today? Any maintenance notes I should be aware of? I remember early in my career, a senior captain told me something I never forgot. He said, "The flight doesn't start when the wheels leave the ground. It starts the moment you open your eyes." At the time, I thought that sounded a little dramatic. 25 years later, I understand exactly what he meant. So by the time I'm walking out my front door, I've already run through the flight in my head a dozen times, and I haven't even started the car yet. When I get to the airport, I'm not going through the same doors you are. Crew members have separate security screening, usually much faster than the passenger lines, though we still go through metal detectors and bag checks. No shortcuts when it comes to safety, even for us. Once I'm through security, I head to what's called the crew room. This is basically our home base before a flight, a quiet area with computers, coffee, and briefing materials. This is usually where I meet my first officer for the day, and often the cabin crew as well. Here's something interesting. A lot of the time, I'm meeting these people for the very first time that morning. We might have never flown together before in our lives, and within minutes, we have to build trust, communicate clearly, and function as a team responsible for hundreds of lives. It's a strange kind of professional intimacy. You don't need to know someone's life story to trust them in the cockpit. You just need to know they're trained, they're sharp, and they take the job seriously. The first real task of the day is the briefing. This is where we go over everything: the weather along our route, the weather at our destination, fuel calculations, the specific aircraft we're flying, and anything called NOTAMs, which stands for Notice to Air Missions. These are basically important updates. Maybe a runway is closed somewhere. Maybe there's construction near an airport. Maybe there's a temporary flight restriction in an area. We also review something called the flight plan, which lays out our exact route, altitude, and how much fuel we'll need, plus extra fuel in case we need to divert somewhere else. Fuel planning might sound boring, but trust me, it's one of the most critical parts of the entire flight. We always carry more than the bare minimum, just in case. Now here's a moment that doesn't happen often, but when it does, it matters a lot. Sometimes during a briefing, something looks off. Maybe the weather forecast at our destination shows a storm system moving in faster than expected. Maybe there's a mechanical note on the aircraft that needs another look. When that happens, we stop. We ask questions. We don't just move forward because the schedule says so. I've delayed flights before because something didn't sit right with me. And you know what? Nobody ever criticized me for that. In this industry, the culture is built around one simple idea: if in doubt, don't. It's better to be late than to be wrong. After the briefing, it's time to head to the actual aircraft. And before anyone gets on that plane, before a single passenger boards, I do something called the walk-around. This is exactly what it sounds like. I physically walk around the entire exterior of the aircraft, checking things with my own eyes. Are the tires in good condition? Is there any visible damage to the fuselage? Are the engines clear of any obstructions? Is there any leaking fluid anywhere it shouldn't be? I check the landing gear, the flaps, the antennas, even small things like the pitot tubes which measure our speed in the air. People sometimes ask me, don't the ground crew already check all this? And yes, they do. But there's something about seeing it with my own eyes that I've never been willing to skip, not once in 25 years. This plane is going to carry me and everyone on board. I want to know it inside and out before I trust it with all our lives. Once the walk-around is done, I head into the cockpit. This is where the real technical setup begins. My first officer and I run through a series of checklists, configuring the flight computers, entering our route into the navigation system, setting up communication frequencies, checking that all our instruments are reading correctly. This is also when we first talk to air traffic control, getting our departure clearance. It's a quick back and forth, but every word matters. Aviation communication is precise for a reason. There's no room for confusion when you're dealing with multiple aircraft moving at high speeds. I'll tell you a quick story. Years ago, early in my career, I was doing a walk-around and noticed something small, a tiny amount of fluid under one of the engines that shouldn't have been there. It probably would have been fine. Probably. But probably isn't good enough in this job. I called it in, maintenance came out, and it turned out to be a minor seal issue that needed fixing before departure. We were delayed almost 2 hours. Passengers were frustrated. But that small leak, if ignored, could have become something much bigger mid-flight. That day taught me that patience and caution will always beat speed in this profession. One more thing worth mentioning here. There's a rule called the sterile cockpit. Below 10,000 feet, during takeoff and landing, pilots aren't allowed to discuss anything that isn't directly related to flying the aircraft. No small talk, no stories, nothing. It sounds strict, but it exists because those are the most critical phases of flight, and distractions during that window have caused real accidents in the past. So when we're below 10,000 feet, it's all business. Now we're at the gate, Passengers are boarding, and this is where a lot of people think my job gets easy, like I just sit there and wait. Not exactly. While passengers are boarding, I'm double-checking our final weight and balance numbers, confirming our fuel load matches what was planned, and coordinating with the ground crew about pushback timing. There's a lot of quiet, behind-the-scenes coordination happening while everyone's finding their seats and stuffing bags into overhead bins. Once the doors are closed and we push back from the gate, we taxi to the runway. This is when I really start focusing. Takeoff is one of the two most demanding parts of a flight, and here's something interesting. During that moment when the aircraft is accelerating down the runway, my mind isn't wandering at all. It's completely locked into the instruments, the speed, the engine performance, listening for anything unusual. There's a specific speed we calculate before every takeoff called V1. Once we pass that speed, we are committed to taking off, no matter what. Below that speed, if something goes wrong, we can still safely stop on the runway. It's a split-second decision point that we've already calculated and briefed before we ever start moving. That's the kind of preparation that goes into just 30 seconds of flight. Communication with air traffic control during takeoff and the climb is constant. They're guiding us, adjusting our altitude, keeping us separated from other aircraft. My first officer and I are working as a team here. One of us flying the plane, the other handling communication and monitoring systems, and we switch roles depending on the flight. Now here's something passengers never see. Once we're climbing and everything is stable, there's this quiet moment of relief that happens every single time, even after 25 years. That moment when the wheels leave the ground and the plane is climbing smoothly, there's a small part of my brain that still finds that amazing. I don't think that feeling ever fully goes away, and honestly, I hope it never does. I want to bust a common myth here too. A lot of passengers assume pilots are anxious or stressed during turbulence or bumpy takeoffs. In reality, we've trained for so many scenarios that what feels scary to a passenger often feels completely routine to us. I've had passengers convinced we were in serious trouble during weather that, from where I'm sitting, was just a normal bumpy ride. Perspective makes a huge difference. I've had some interesting moments with passengers over the years too. Situations where someone insisted on seeing the cockpit before takeoff because they were nervous, or someone who brought a small gift for the crew as a thank you. Or someone who cried tears of joy because it was their first flight ever going to see family they hadn't seen in years. Those moments remind me why this job matters beyond just the technical side of it. We're not just flying metal through the sky, we're carrying people's most important moments with them. Once we level off at cruising altitude, things shift into a different rhythm. This is usually somewhere between 32,000 and 40,000 feet, depending on the aircraft and the route. This is the part passengers imagine as boring for us, and honestly, in the calmest sense, it kind of is. But boring in aviation is actually the goal. A calm cruise means everything is going exactly as planned. During this phase, my first officer and I are monitoring systems, checking in periodically with air traffic control as we cross different airspace zones, and keeping an eye on weather ahead of us using onboard radar. We take turns for meal breaks and bathroom breaks, and yes, there are strict procedures for that too. One pilot never leaves the cockpit alone without another authorized crew member present. Again, just another safety layer built into everything we do. We also talk. Not constantly, but there's definitely conversation during cruise, about families, about previous flights, sometimes just casual life stuff. It's actually one of the nicer parts of the job, getting to know a new colleague over the hours of a long flight. Now let's talk about turbulence, because I get asked about this constantly. Turbulence is basically just air movement. Think of it like driving over a bumpy road, except the road is invisible air currents. It can be caused by weather systems, jet streams, or even mountains below us affecting airflow. It feels intense sometimes, especially if you're not expecting it, but modern aircraft are built to handle turbulence far beyond what feels comfortable to a passenger. I've flown through turbulence that had people gripping their armrests, while in the cockpit, we're just calmly adjusting altitude to find smoother air, treating it as a routine annoyance rather than a danger. I do want to share one moment from years ago that stuck with me. We were mid-flight over the ocean when a call came from the cabin crew. A passenger was having a serious medical emergency. We immediately started calculating our closest suitable airport for an emergency landing, coordinating with air traffic control, and got medical professionals on standby ready the moment we touched down. That flight went from routine to intense within minutes. We landed safely. The passenger got the help they needed. And honestly, moments like that remind you how much responsibility sits on your shoulders every single time you're up there. It's not something you think about consciously on every flight, but it's always there quietly in the back of your mind. Here's something that surprises a lot of people. Takeoff gets a lot of attention, but landing is actually the harder, more skill-demanding part of flying. Why? Because takeoff is mostly about acceleration and climbing in a fairly predictable way. Landing involves bringing a massive aircraft down to a very precise spot, at a very precise speed, often while dealing with crosswinds, changing weather, and other traffic in the area, all while slowing down and controlling descent perfectly. Crosswind landings are probably the most technically demanding thing we do. That's when the wind is blowing sideways across the runway instead of straight down it. We use a technique where we actually point the nose of the aircraft slightly into the wind during approach, then straighten it out right before the wheels touch down. It requires precise timing and feel for the aircraft that really only comes from years of experience. Weather adds another layer of challenge too. Landing in heavy rain, low visibility, or fog requires using additional instruments, and sometimes even automated landing systems, that guide the aircraft down with incredible precision, when visibility is too poor for a fully manual landing. After we land and taxi to the gate, there's a quick debrief between me and my first officer. We talk about how the flight went, anything unusual we noticed, anything we'd do differently. It's a habit that keeps us sharp flight after flight, year after year. I'll never forget one landing a few years back. We were coming into an airport during a sudden weather shift, strong crosswinds that popped up faster than forecasted. It was one of those landings where every second required total focus, adjusting constantly right up until the wheels touched the runway. When we finally landed smoothly despite those conditions, there was this quiet moment between me and my first officer, just a small nod, no words needed. That nod said everything. We did our job, and we did it right. Now let's talk about the part of this job that nobody really glamorizes life beyond the actual flying. A lot of people imagine pilots living this exciting jet-setting lifestyle, staying in nice hotels, exploring new cities all the time. And sure, there are moments like that. But there's another side too. Layovers can be lonely. I've spent countless nights in hotel rooms in cities I barely got to see because I was there for less than 24 hours before flying back out. I've missed birthdays. I've missed anniversaries. I've missed my kids' school events because my schedule simply didn't allow for it. That's a sacrifice that doesn't show up in the glamorous photos you see online of pilots posing in front of aircraft in exotic locations. There's also the physical toll, disrupted sleep schedules, time zone changes, being away from home for days at a stretch. It affects your body and your relationships in ways that took me years to fully understand and adjust to. If someone dreams of becoming a pilot, here's my honest advice. Do it if you truly love flying, not because it looks impressive or exciting from the outside. Because the reality includes early mornings, missed family moments, and constant studying even after decades in the industry, since aviation regulations and technology are always evolving. But if you love it, genuinely love the feeling of being in the sky and the responsibility that comes with it, there's nothing else quite like this career. Would I choose this career again, knowing everything I know now? Honestly, yes, without hesitation. Despite the sacrifices, despite the exhaustion, despite the moments I've missed with my family, there's something about this job that gets into your blood. That feeling of climbing above the clouds, watching a sunrise from a perspective almost nobody else gets to see, knowing that you got hundreds of people safely to where they needed to be. That feeling has never once gotten old for me in 25 years. So there you have it, a full day in my life as a commercial pilot. From that 3 a.m. alarm to the walk-around where I check every inch of that aircraft with my own eyes, to the quiet focus during takeoff, the calm routine at cruising altitude, and that intense concentration during landing that most passengers never even think about. This job isn't just about flying a plane from one place to another. It's about responsibility, constant learning, sacrifice, and yes, still finding that same sense of wonder every single time those wheels lift off the ground. If you learned something new today, or if this gave you a little more appreciation for what happens up front the next time you fly, let me know in the comments. I read every single one of them. Tell me, what's the one question you've always wanted to ask a pilot? I might answer it in a future video. And if you want to see part 2, where I get into emergency situations pilots train for, or what it's really like flying through severe weather, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Share this with someone you know who loves aviation or someone who's always nervous about flying. This might just help them see things a little differently. Thanks for spending this time with me today. This is Captain Alex signing off. I'll see you in the next one.